Good evening, everybody. All right, we've got a number of people tuning in. Welcome to another Monday evening on our Clear Mountain Monastery YouTube channel. It's great to see so many people coming out to listen to Dhamma and hopefully discuss Dhamma, talk about Dhamma, thinking about Dhamma. These are all useful things to do from time to time, or as much as possible. So maybe I could just get a sound check. Can people hear my sound okay? All right. Well, this evening we are going to, as we have done in previous weeks, to be talking directly about the suttas, about the Buddha's discourses. Tonight I will begin talking about a sutta which is very dear to my heart. It's the Sabbasava Sutta, which is the second discourse in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses. And Sabbasava by Bhikkhu Bodhi is translated as all the taints. This is Sabba meaning all, and Asava meaning, they're pretty much, if you have a different translator, you'll have a different translation. Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as taints, as does Bhikkhu Nyanamoli. Ajahn Jeff translates it as fermentations, other people as inflows or outflows. Basically, these are all of the mental hindrances or defilements. And the Buddha's advice on a very all-encompassing, very rounded and grounded way of approaching the practice. This isn't a one technique. This is a whole armamentarium. This is a whole slew of different techniques that the Buddha gives us. Specifically, he mentions, I believe it's 7 different techniques for abandoning these mental hindrances. So tonight we'll just be talking about the first, which is abandoning the hindrances, abandoning the asavas through seeing, through clear seeing. Other translations include abandoning by insight, dasana. It literally means seeing. So as the same word is used for the seeing with our mind's eye as it is with our fleshy eyeballs. So these are the hindrances to be abandoned by seeing. And in future weeks, we'll hopefully have a chance to examine some of the other ways of abandoning the asavas, which include abandoning by restraining, abandoning by using, enduring, avoiding, removing, and developing. So when I first became interested in Buddhism, I had already been meditating for a while. I was meditating in a specific meditation tradition that is very technique-based, and you learn a very good, useful technique, which is totally non-sectarian. It's basically just focusing on the breath, focusing on sensations in the body, and it's a wonderful technique. But I found when I tried to take that technique into a whole life, where I'm not just sitting in a quiet hall with a bunch of other people who are being quiet, but when I actually go out and try to do my job or try to study, or just deciding what I'm studying, deciding who I'm talking to, who I'm associating with, how I'm eating, where I'm living, all these other different considerations that just can't come under the rubric of just a technique. There's no technique in the world that will teach you all the skills you need for living. So although I was and am still very grateful for learning this particular meditation method, I really was searching for more teachings which would give me a broader and more encompassing way to approach my life. Basically, I've got this meditation technique, but I want to live these teachings, and this particular meditation lineage is so good at kind of hiding its Buddhist Buddhist origins, or at least that's how I was taking it. That I didn't even know that it was teaching a Buddhist technique, and it took me about a year to realize that it was Buddhist insight practice that was being taught. But right around that same time, about a year after my first retreat, I came across the Pali Canon, came across the Satipatthana Sutta, which is basically the most fundamental text on all-around mindfulness cultivation. And I came across this sutta. And this sutta really opened my mind to the whole spectrum of life practices which the Buddha taught. So the last technique, which hopefully we'll get to, if not this month, then next month, is the taints to be abandoned by developing. So that specifically the Pali word is bhavana, which is often translated in English as meditation. So that was the main focus of my early meditational experience, is those taints to be abandoned by meditation, by development. But yeah, how do I eat? Where do I live? How do I relate to my surroundings and the people who I'm living with? So yes, this sutta it's almost a panacea. It's almost a cure for all of your ailments, but it's very much in bare bones skeleton format. So the type of taints which are elaborated most explicitly are the taints to be abandoned by seeing. So maybe for the rest of tonight's talk and Q&A, maybe I'll just refer to these taints as asava, just to get people used to the Pali. It's a very fundamental word and concept to get your mind around, because in Buddhism there is a goal. A working goal is to stay in the present moment and to approach the present moment with as much clarity and as much clear seeing as we can manage. But an ultimate or a further goal, which the Buddha taught, was nibbana. It's explained in many ways, but one of the definitions of nibbana is the abandoning of all the taints. So abandoning of all greed, all anger, or all delusion. Or another way of elaborating the type of defilements specifically related to the asavas are the asavas of sensuality, the asavas of becoming, and the asavas of ignorance, avijja. So by practicing this path, whether it's in meditation, when we have the time and can have the space to sit formally in meditation, this is what we're practicing seeing. We're practicing to come to the present moment and to see our minds and to see those passing mind states which are helpful and which are not helpful. So yeah, I think I'll just read and explicate as we go along. This is a very, very traditional way of talking about the suttas, is to actually have a discourse in front of the person who's giving the Dhamma talk, and they'll actually read for a bit and then give some kind of exegesis, give some kind of explanation for what's been going on, either explaining specific terms or explaining whole concepts. So the earliest commentaries, which were, as we have them recorded, were from Buddhaghosa around the time of about 900 to 1,000 years after the Buddha, and he very much followed this model. So he had in his basically the written commentaries, he'll basically have a bunch of lines of the original sutta, and then he will explicate. So he will say, "What taints bhikkhus should be abandoned by seeing?" That's a line from the original discourse, and then he might say something like, "What does the Buddha mean by taints?" And then he'll give an elaboration, oftentimes giving this kind of folk etymology for the terms, which are fun things to look at. So I think in general we'll follow this same format of keeping very close to the text itself, and it's something which I appreciate. It keeps us grounded in the discourses, and it keeps me grounded in the discourses. And for people, hopefully you can follow along. There's a link to this discourse, actually several translations, in the line notes. So yeah, you can follow along, and I think that'll make the whole experience more enriching, because you'll be able to not only hear what I'm explicating, but also be thinking about it yourself, which is great. Tonight I think I'll probably just give maybe 20 or 30 minutes of general outline, and then we'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts. I find that much more useful for me than just me talking on and on. So yeah, what taints bhikkhus should be abandoned by seeing? Here bhikkhus, an untaught, ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, does not understand what things are fit for attention and what things are unfit for attention. Since that is so, he attends to those things unfit for attention, and he does not attend to those things fit for attention. So that is a summary of what it means to, what the Buddha is pointing to by this quality of seeing. Basically, it's seeing in line with what's appropriate, or what is fit for attention. This will bring up a concept which I think many people here will be used to hearing, is yoniso manasikara. Manasikara is the work of the mind, so basically thoughts, and yoniso means appropriate, or basically intelligent thinking. So one way this whole topic of seeing correctly, seeing with one's mind's eye, seeing in line with the Buddha's teaching, one way they talk about it in Thailand is, I find very useful. It's basically to say kit ben. Kit means to think, and ben can mean to be, but it can also mean to be skilled at. So seeing in this context, seeing with one's mind eye rightly, is basically being able to think, knowing how to think in a way which is in line with the Dhamma, which is an extremely useful, vital skill for the path. We live and we think, and even if we can attain jhana meditation, we're not going to be in jhana all the time, and we need to know how to think, and the Buddha taught us how to do this. So a number of things to point out here. So bhikkhus, if you're new to Dhamma, bhikkhu just means it means monk. When the Buddha uses it, it actually can stand in as a placeholder for anyone in his audience. So it's bhikkhus, or oh monks, and everyone else who's listening. It's a placeholder. So basically, bhikkhus refers to everyone who's here in this chat and anyone who subsequently listens to this, and it means you can just take it generally as practitioners. Yeah, we do have some gendered language talking about someone who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma. The Pali here is sapurisa, and puriso, though it usually does mean man, it can just mean human. And sa means true, so it's a true human. It has nothing to do with men or women or any kind of gendered or sex-based designation. It's basically a true person, and that has a very specific definition in the Buddha's teaching. The foremost true person is an arhat, is someone who's put aside and abandoned all of these asavas that we're talking about. But yeah, the Buddha also uses this word sapurisa, true man, true person, to refer to anyone who is sincere, being true in their practice of the path. And the more, and we're just all along a continuum of this practice of being sapurisa. So, yeah, we want to be associating with sapurisa in order to learn how they think. We've got the discourses of the Buddha. We've got discourses of early monks in the Therigatha, verses of early nuns in the Therigatha, and that's great. These are worthy, noble, true men and women, true humans. But yeah, all of us are practicing in that direction as well. So we want to surround ourselves with people. The more true, the better. So basically, the less defiled, the better. And again, you can't really judge. Nobody. There aren't like, there's no scale. It's not like a video game. You can't look at somebody and see what their kilesa or asava level is. Floating above their head. But you can tell through conversation. So what we want to be doing when we practice this seeing is paying attention to those things which are fit for attention, and not paying attention to those things which are unfit for attention. And then the Buddha goes through what are those things which are unfit for attention that one who is unskilled in seeing attends to. They're things which, when someone pays attention to them, it gives rise to three things. We've already labeled these. These are the asava of sensuality, the asava of becoming, and the asava of ignorance. So basically, to maybe try to remove some of this Buddhist jargon, it's basically when we pay attention or when we look at something in a way which gives rise to greed or to anger or to this sense of comparison. That's what the becoming is pointing to, is me becoming something, me becoming better, this something which is very popular, very almost default for at least Americans in their 30s. We're very much in this becoming mode. We're going to show our bosses that we're the best. We're going to show the world that we've got the best podcast in the world, or we've got, we write the best reports, or we do the best whatever. And that's becoming. It's basically expanding this sense of I in a way which is unhelpful. So yeah, we don't want to be paying attention in a way which gives rise to those things: sensuality, becoming, and ignorance. And the next paragraph. So this is how one attends unwisely. Then there's this list of all sorts of speculations about the past and the future and the present. And you'll notice, if you're looking at it yourself, that there are all of these, basically it's just I. Was I in the past? Was I not in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? Having been what? What did I become? And then with regards to the future, shall I be in the future? Shall I not be in the future? Etc., etc. Or he is inwardly perplexed about the present thus: am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? where has this being come from and where will it go? And it's easy to make fun of these inner proliferations, this inner I making and my making. But internally, it's a very subtle process, and we're really doing it all the time. And hopefully what we're doing is we train our minds formally in meditation as we slow down our thinking, focus on one object, become better at being able to stay with one object, where we can see when this sense of I or becoming is manifesting, when we're thinking about the past, thinking about the future, or even proliferating about the present. These are probably meditation instructions which everybody is used to. This is when you are sitting in meditation, the meditation instructor will say, focus on the breath or focus on your meditation object. And keep coming back. And the mind will go off to the future or to the past. Or you might have craving or aversion about things which are happening in the present, but you just keep coming back. Back to the breath. Back to your object of meditation. And that's what we're doing when we start proliferating about the future. Usually, I can't say always, but for the most part, it is this rather I-based future that I'm creating. This story about me having done something in the past, or me about to do something in the future, or how I'm related to other people and what they're going to do, making an I out of them. And these are all unskillful ways of reifying our experience of reality. Basically taking us out of the present moment and into this kind of fantasy of I and you and me and us and etc. And the Buddha calls this is a great phrase which it's worth memorizing. The Buddha calls all these different ways of looking. These speculative views are a thicket of views, a wilderness of views, a contortion of views, a vacillation of views, and a fetter of views. So as soon as you start to notice that your mind is wandering and is just spiraling around and keeping, we bring our mind back to the breath, but then the mind goes out again and just jumps on all of these stories and this fetter. We're just stuck. It's a thicket of views. We've been doing it, for who knows how many lifetimes, and just making up so many stories and just tying ourselves in knots with all of these eyes that we're fabricating. So fortunately, this isn't the only way to think. And when we talk about being skilled at thinking, the Buddha gives us a method of thinking which doesn't lead to this fetter of views, doesn't lead to this contortion, this writhing, this vacillation, this fetter, this all of these speculative views. And what is that? That is thinking in line with the Four Noble Truths. So one attends wisely in a way which doesn't give rise to sensuality, to becoming, and to ignorance. How do they do that? He attends wisely. This is suffering. They attend wisely. This is the cause of suffering. One attends wisely. This is the cessation of suffering. One attends wisely. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. When one attends wisely in this way, 3 fetters are abandoned in him or her: personality view, doubt, and adherence to rites and rituals. these are called the taints that should be abandoned by seeing. And so those three fetters, probably some people will recognize that this is referring to the first three of the 10 fetters, which are basically, these are 10 unwholesome mind states which are gradually abandoned over the course of our meditative development. The first type of, with the first realization state, this is stream entry. We abandoned these three fetters, which are the fetter of rights, personality view, doubt, and adherence to rules and rituals. And we do this by seeing the Four Noble Truths. Really, the Four Noble Truths are our path. They are, they're our vehicle. And there's, many discourses. There's a whole Samyutta, a whole grouping of discourses in the Samyutta Nikaya about the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha said that the Four Noble Truths are like a big footprint, like a big elephant footprint, where all of the smaller footprints of various animals in the forest fit inside of that. And similarly, all of his teachings can fit inside the Four Noble Truths. And we need to be able to think in line with the Buddha, in line with the Four Noble Truths. In one discourse in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha says, you shouldn't think in line with all sorts of different speculative views, but you should practice thinking. This is to be done, this is to be practiced, is start thinking about, this is suffering, this is the cause of suffering, this is the cessation, this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. And why is this useful? Because it takes us out of the picture. It's just a matter of dukkha and what caused it and what will lead to its end and how we can bring that about. So it's a much less personal and unfettered way of approaching our lives and our views and our mind and our brains. So yeah, that's just a very quick introduction to the fetters which are to be abandoned by seeing in the Sabbasava Sutta. So we can maybe take some questions. Okay. So here's a question from Original Mind. I may have missed the beginning of this question, but as I see it now, but the power or skill is in the why. Why are the dualities of self and not self and any combination rejected? Why are the dualities of self rejected? So this is an interesting question, an interesting point of view. I think, especially for Americans who have been through many years of schooling, it's so important to always ask, to always know the why. So there's even a really interesting form of problem solving, which is called the 5 whys. So basically you ask a question such as, are the dualities of self and not self, or any combination of that, rejected? And I could answer, yes, in a way. We do not necessarily reject them, but we do try to skillfully abandon them. And then with this 5 why technique, you would say, but why do you abandon them? And then the person answering gives another answer, and basically you go on with 5 more whys. So that can be a useful technique if people really need an answer to why. But there's also just the faith types. And if any of you are out there are faith types, then you can just say, oh, the Buddha said that this way of thinking leads to dukkha, this way of thinking leads to suffering, and then that's good enough for me, as that's what a faith type person would say. But yeah, this is a good question, and it's useful. I mean, that's why we're here, is asking questions. So, are the dualities of self and not self rejected? It's a complicated question. There are working views of self which the Buddha allows us to use while we're abandoning and totally uprooting conceit and delusions about abjectly, obviously false views of self. So the Buddha talked about being skilled in self, atta sampada, which can be conceived of as self-esteem. The Buddha talked about, even in the Anapanasati Sutta, which Buddhika Ajahn mentions, talking about Anapana meditation. Even in that discourse and in the Satipatthana, there is mention of I. So the Buddha is not, and the Buddha uses I in many of his discourses. The Buddha talks about self. In the Anapana or breath meditation discourse, one of the ways that we train is breathing in long, I know, I breathe in long. Breathing in short, I know, I breathe out short. So there's still this I, this self that we're using as a stepping stone. It's like a reverse gateway drug, is that we are basically eventually trying to uproot a sense of self and a sense of not self. An arhat is totally free from attachment to either. But in the process, we have to use this sense of self. We've been, certainly this whole life, we've been utterly trapped by our conceivings about self. But yeah, we got to use what we have, and we can use self while it's to the extent that it's useful. But as the Buddha is saying here with this way of seeing, is that we can also think in terms of just suffering, which totally circumvents the problem of self. Okay. Here's another question. So Kumu writes, guess they are fetters in meditation, as then the mind will always wonder. Is that right? At other times, is it okay to think about those as questions to ponder? Okay, I think what Kumu is pointing to is this whole list of different views, which was I in the past, was I not in the past, what was I in the past, etc. And yeah, Kumu, you make a good point that they are, if our meditation is a focused meditation, if we're taking a specific object like the breath as our meditation topic, then these are our fetters for practicing that meditation technique. They don't necessarily need to be fetters for different types of meditation. So there are certain types of insight meditation, vipassana, where you can just see a thought coming, you can see these arising, and so I'm sitting meditation and thought arises. Oh, was I in the past? Yeah, is rebirth real? Is it? What about that? What who was I in the past? And this arises, and if one's practicing a certain type of vipassana, then you can just note that as a thought, and it can just pass. And if you just let it pass, and it does, then it's hard to even consider it as being a fetter. The second question, at other times, is it okay to think about those questions to ponder? This is a good question as well. One kind of counterpoint to this would be, so here in the Sabbasava Sutta, the Buddha is saying, it is unwise to attend to the thought, was I in the past, was I not in the past? But didn't the Buddha teach rebirth? Isn't he saying that, didn't he even say that right view, it's part of right view to believe in rebirth? There is this world, there is the next world, this type of thing. Isn't there a contradiction there? So I think where the distinction lies in is how we're thinking about it, how tightly we're clinging to this sense of self. And basically, I think one thing we can do is take those different synonyms for this type of conjecturing, the fetter, the vacillation, the contortion, the writhing, the thicket of views, the wilderness of views. Take all of these as, yeah, as affective or feeling-based pointers or indicators that the way that we're thinking about this is unhelpful. So if we bring up this question in our mind, yeah, was I in the past? And it leads to this whole slew of unhelpful speculation, which most thinking in that vein can. Was I in the past? I mean, maybe I should go see the Madhu, go see the fortune teller. Yeah, they could tell me who I was in the past, and that would be useful, because that would, tell me why I've got this scar on my head, or why I tend to be afraid of heights, or whatever. But yeah, is the way you're thinking about it contortion? Is it leading you to bend up your thoughts in a way which is ultimately unhelpful? How easily can you drop the thought? That might be a good test. Yeah, was I in the past? If you can drop the thought just like that, then you're approaching it in a rather healthy way. But I think the moral of this way of seeing is that, if possible, and to the extent that we can, really shifting our focus away from this I-based speculation to more, phenomenon-based thinking, phenomenon-based seeing. Okay, so whether or not I existed in the past, is there suffering now? What was there suffering in the past? What kind of suffering was in the past that led me to be experiencing what I'm experiencing now? I think that would be a more useful question. See if you can do that. See if you can, yeah, every place where the speculator is saying, was I in the past? Maybe just see if we can switch out the word suffering. So, was there suffering in the past? Was there not suffering in the past? What kind of suffering was in the past? How was I suffering in the past? And the Buddha, the place that we live is the present moment. That's our working ground. And we want to become more and more apt, more and more able to stay in the present. But the Buddha did think about the past, and the Buddha did think about the future. He didn't think in terms of the self, because he saw that he saw the emptiness of those concepts. But yeah, he could think of the past and the future. And I think it's fair to say that he would be thinking of dukkha in the past, dukkha in the present, dukkha in the future. What dukkha in the past, or what craving in the past, that's the second noble truth, led to this experience of dukkha in the present. So thank you, Kumla. That was a useful way of thinking about things. Okay, so another question. So Siddhartha called it a thicket of views. Why did he call them a thicket of ignorance? Maybe the question is just about this word thicket, which is basically a thick, tangled mess of briars, maybe with thorns. So it's possible I didn't understand your question. So you could try writing it again. Okay, so from Gita Jnana. So Bhante, if we examine thoughts that arise in each moment, we would be able to examine and see impermanent suffering and not self and let go. If we examine thoughts that arise in each moment, how about would we be able to examine and see impermanent suffering and not self and let go? It helps. These are our tools. So it's like you say, say I want to dig, like I know something is buried underground. I'm trying to dig to a certain pipe which runs, it's about 3 feet underground. And if I take one scoop of the shovel into the ground at the top layer, then I don't see the pipe because it's 3 feet under the ground. It's under the ground. It's too far. But that doesn't mean that the shovel isn't a good tool. It just means that we haven't gotten there yet. And similarly, yeah, when we examine thoughts, we examine basically impermanence, suffering, and not self. These are our tools. These are our shovels. These are our brushes, which we brush away all the dust of these different asavas, these different inflows or outflows. And the more we use the brush, the more we use the shovel, then the more we'll be able to let go. But it's not necessarily the case that, right now, I or you can just close your eyes, bring your attention to your hands, and you can have a absolutely valid experiential realization and deep seeing into impermanence. Right now, my hands are tingling. If they were solid, if there was permanence to them, then my hands wouldn't be tingling. So I can see that, but does that necessarily mean that I can let go of whatever hindrance is assaulting me? Not necessarily, because the hindrances have their own timeline. They're at their own depths. Yeah, certain hindrances are more shallow or more deep, and we can't. There's no. Yeah, we could just use the tools we have to the best of our ability. Okay. So as a lay practitioner, how do we balance maintaining an inspired practice by getting lost in becoming? Yeah, this is a good question. Yeah, I mean, there are different types of inspiration. Like if you go to a Tony Robbins conference, yeah, I mean, no diss on Tony Robbins. He's a really powerful speaker, and there's probably some wisdom there. But that type of conference, I've never been to one of his, so I can't totally say. But that type of basically like self-promotional self-help gurus, really encourage this type of inspiration, which is very like self-based, which is, okay, I can succeed, I can attain nibbana, I can do it, it's in me, and even like affirmations to that effect, like, yes, I can, of course I can, and just repeating, yes, I can, I am capable, I am capable, I am capable. This type of thing. But there's also a type of inspiration which is less I-based, which I think is maybe more in line with the Dhamma, that, Anguttara 2, as the Buddha said, it is possible to abandon the unwholesome. If it were not possible to abandon the unwholesome, he wouldn't say, abandon the unwholesome. But since it is possible, then you should do it, and it leads to happiness. Similarly, cultivate the wholesome. It is possible to cultivate the wholesome. If it wasn't, then he wouldn't say to do it. And if doing it didn't lead to happiness and welfare, then he wouldn't say to do it. But since it does, then he does. So yeah, thinking about inspiration in that way doesn't lock us up and fasten us to this this becoming energy of I've got to practice. I've got my daily practice. Yeah, habits are important. And yeah, to some extent, using the self, using more intelligent sense of self, can give you inspiration. So, yeah, having a sense of self, and again, take this as a provisionary sense of self, a sense of self that is, I'm someone who keeps precepts. I'm someone who likes to practice generosity. I'm someone who meditates every morning for 45 minutes. I meditate every afternoon for however long. And I meditate again in the evening for however long. That is a sense of self. And you can make trouble for yourself out of that. Like when you miss a session and you start to hate yourself, or when you're put in a situation where you don't want to give, but then there's this kind of unhelpful sense of guilt or shame. But there is some becoming there, but I think you just kind of have to rely on your own sense of what it means and what it feels like to actually get lost in that. So yeah, I'm a monk. I'm a monk, and that means a lot to me, actually. But I and all monks really need to be careful of that, like I don't want to be so attached to this identity that it leads to conceit, or it leads to other unhelpful states, which are really just based on ignorance and will cause me more trouble in the end than they will alleviate me from trouble. Whereas if I hold it, well, I'm a monk. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't hit anybody. I wouldn't lie to anybody. Yeah, that's a helpful sense of self, and I don't need to make a Kovilo bhikkhu out of that. It's just refraining from the unwholesome. And maybe I might just take one more question. Maybe two, but maybe just one. Ajahn Kovilo, what should I do? This is from Luciana. What should I do when I meditate? I felt there would be other beings present, and I'm scared. Ajahn Kovilo, what should I do when I meditate? I felt that there were other beings present, and I'm scared. This is this can happen. I think what the questioner is speaking to is a feeling that maybe there are unseen beings in the same room as one. And for people listening at any point, if you don't believe in other realms of existence that are unseeable to us, then that's totally fine. You can just you can relate to that sense in a different way. But in the Pali Canon, there is acknowledgement that there are other realms of existence. But for us, on a practical level, it's not necessarily a sure thing. So we might have a feeling that there's someone present, and we might be right, or something present, and we might be wrong. And it's, I think for people who are who have these kind of feelings, it can almost feel like if you're in a rather small room and someone is looking at you, there's that weird sense that you want to turn around to feel like the laser eyes which are being directed in your in your way. Yeah, so I would say for anyone who's experiencing this, if it's scary, so the Buddha did talk about benevolent realms and rather ghostly realms. So with a benevolent realm, if someone is feeling like there's a sense of light around one, then that's one thing. But if you're scared by the feeling, then you can try a number of things. You can open your eyes. Sometimes that will help. If you have a mantra, in the Thai forest tradition in which I ordained, the very simple mantra, Buddho, Buddho, Bud on the in-breath, Do on the out-breath. Or if you're just really scared, then Buddho, 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 Buddho. You can put it to whatever melody you like. And there are many, many Thai forest masters who use this method as almost like not almost as, but literally as a protective mantra. And I myself, I've had similar feelings. Very rare, but I remember one time in particular, I was at my hut, and I'm not, before I ordained, or my whole life, I'm 38, I may have had one or two of these experiences, maybe just two. But this weird sense of this dark or this foreboding presence, which is, very close to me. And basically, I just remembered this Buddha mantra and just Buddha, 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 Buddha. You go like super speed on the Buddha mantra, and I just like held very fast to. It's like the whatever kind of darkness is. I feel is kind of haunting or is is right up close. I just hold on, Buddha, 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 Buddha. And this is a good thing with fear. Yeah, you want to relate to your fear so that it's as if the fear is pushing you forward, not as if the fear is holding you back. So, to be able to do that is you need a tool. So you could try this this mantra, Buddho, and maybe it'll work. And again, I'm not saying that I necessarily, that there was some being that was haunting me or whatever at the time, but it felt that way. And using the mantra did work to alleviate that. It worked to some extent. Basically, it just passed, and I was able to hold on to my Buddho kind of rope, life raft, and the foreboding passed. So there are lots of comments, which are great, and I think I can save the YouTube video to keep the comments, which I'll go back and read. But it's about time. I really thank everybody for coming, and I think I learned a few things about this. I learned about substituting, the word suffering in my own proliferations. So if I start thinking, was I in the past, or will I be in the future, I can just shift that I, just change the simple word, will there be suffering in the future? Will there be the cessation of suffering in the future? What, when I do it right now, what, when it's done right now, will lead to the cessation of suffering in the future? Was there suffering in the past? This type of thing. And that's just one thing I've learned. And so I appreciate everyone being here. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the week. For me, it's a great way to start a Monday evening. So I wish you all the best, and you can keep tuning in to Clear Mountain Monastery YouTube, and there's also a podcast. Tan Nisabo and I are kind of taking turns. I think he's doing most of the YouTubes these days, and he gives a good talk. So tune in for more Nisabo, and in future weeks, more Kovilo as well. So yeah, take care, everybody.